Everyone, welcome to Time with the Bible Live. We've been going through the Gospels, trying to get to know Jesus better, looking at some of the events, some of the teachings, and some of the interactions that he had in his life while he was here on this earth. Trying to think about who Jesus was and who we need to be as Christians and as those who seek to follow him. I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully, you find this to be a valuable study as we look at one of the events that happened in the last week of his life. Actually, we're going to be in Mark chapter 11. We're going to look in beginning there in verse 27. We're in a period of time of his life where Jesus is being questioned by his enemies constantly. They're trying to trap him. They're trying to find something in order to put him to death. I wanted to think about what's been going on in the last couple days before this time. On Sunday, he rode into Jerusalem as a humble king into his capital city, and the people were singing his praises. And the people, really the Jewish leaders, were troubled by that and told him to tell them to be quiet. And so he rode in on Sunday, and on Monday he comes back into the temple, and he drives out those who are selling, and those who are selling sacrifices and doves and lambs and that type of thing. And he drives them out because they had really turned what was meant to be a house of prayer into a marketplace. And so he drives them out and he cleanses the temple. And then this is Tuesday. We're going to be reading here. We're going to begin in verse 27 and look at the question that they had for him. In verse 27, it says, "Then they had come to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders came to him. And they said to him, 'By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you the authority to do these things?' But Jesus answered and said to them, 'I also will ask you one question, and then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men? Answer me.' And they reasoned amongst themselves, saying, 'If we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men,' they feared the people, for all counted John to have been a prophet indeed. And so they answered and said to Jesus, 'We do not know.' And Jesus answered and said to them, 'Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things.'" Now, after the cleansing of the temple, this is the first time that Jesus is actually in the temple previous to this. And so when he comes back to Jerusalem and he enters into the temple, they have some questions. And they ask him this question. They said, "By what authority are you doing these things?" And I think what really they're asking is, who gave you the right? Who gave you the right to come in here and to do all these things and to try to tell us how to run our business, try to tell us how to run things here in the temple? So these are the Jewish leaders, and I think that they are really at the point where they're fed up. Remember back in the cleansing of the temple in verse 18, it says, "And the scribes and the chief priests heard it, and they sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because of all the people were astonished at his teaching." The people were just amazed at him. And really, this has been a theme throughout the entire book of Mark. And actually, as I meant to say, but this is also found in Matthew 20, or Luke 20 and Matthew 25. This is also found in other places throughout the Gospels. But really, it's the same story. It accounts some of the same things that happen here. But I want to think about through Mark. If you just go back to the beginning of Mark, really the time at the end of chapter 1, I was thinking about what people thought of the authority of Jesus. Apologize, I didn't have this written down, but I wanted to go back through and look and see a few different places through here. Actually, it's in chapter 2, I believe. I wanted to find this place. I apologize. Well, I'm trying to look for it and I still can't find it. But there was another time when it says he was speaking with authority and the people were amazed at him. They're amazed at the things that he was saying. He didn't teach as the scribes and the Pharisees. Like the scribes would say, like, I teach in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. Rabbi so-and-so says this or that. And he would really just recount the things that the rabbis would say. That's kind of the way the scribes and the Pharisees would teach. But Jesus didn't teach that way. Jesus would say things like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Or you've heard it been said, but I say unto you. And he would teach like he's the one who's in control. Or like, you have the words that will judge you in the last day, the words that I'm giving you. And so he taught like he was the one that was in control. And then later on, a man with an unclean spirit walked in, and Jesus challenged them on that. Man, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to know where that was. I thought it was at the beginning of chapter 2, but I don't think that's not where. I wasn't right on that. But the people were just, after he commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man with just simply his words, the people were amazed, and they said, what form of doctrine is this? Even the demons believe, even the demons hear and obey his voice. And all the way through Mark, you think about his voice and the power of it, that he would say, peace, be still, and the winds and the waves would be at complete peace. And so all the way through here, his words have been seen as a source of authority. And now he's cleansed the temple, and they're asking him, by what authority, who gave you the right to come in here and to tell us how to run things and to do things? And so they've asked him this question, and Jesus answered and said to them that I have a question for you. He says, if you answer my question, then I'll answer yours. And you find out that as you go through the text, you see that this is just a really insincere question that they had. And you'll see that how they respond. And Jesus has a question back for them. He does what a good rabbi does in answering questions. He will ask questions to lead people, to their answer. Yeah, I think it's chapter 1:27. Yes, the unclean spirit. There you go. I knew it was back in chapter 1. I couldn't remember where. So the question that he asked for them is, by whose authority? Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. His question that he asked, John the Baptist, the baptism of John the Baptist, is it from heaven or from men? Answer me. Now, I like his question that he asked here. He asked, is something from heaven or from men? Like, that's a perfect question for us to be asking when it comes to anything that we do, when it comes to the way that we live, when it comes to, we're thinking about the works of the church, when it comes about our worship, when it comes about the authority to do anything that we have been asked to do. We need to be asking ourselves, does it come from heaven or does it come from men? And how do we know the difference between the two? Well, if it's from heaven, then it's in the Bible. If it's not from heaven, then it's not found in the Bible. So this is a question that we need to be asking ourselves as we are doing things that God's asked of us. And so specifically, he's asking about the baptism of John. And where did it come from? Was it something that God had commanded, or is it something that was made up by John? And that's a great question. And look at how they thought in verse 31 and 32, because you kind of see their thought process in answering this question. They reason amongst themselves, saying, if we say it's from heaven, he will say, why didn't you believe him? And so they're thinking like politicians. If we answer it this way, then this is going to be the result of what we say. And if we answer it this way, then this is going to be the result of what we say. Politicians they're not really seeking the truth on a lot of things. They're more thinking about the response of how they answer a lot of things. They They take polls, they do studies on answers and how it'll get a response from the people. That's the way politicians work. But so they're not really seeking the truth. Like if I was to ask you, were you watching the live today? And if you were to think, well, see, if I say that I was watching the live, that means that I wasn't doing something else. Or if I say that I wasn't watching the live, I can just be in denial. That's not really seeking the truth. You would say, oh yeah, I was watching the live today. I was watching. So, it says if they thought if we say it's from heaven, then he'll say, why don't you believe him? If we say it's from men, then they feared the people, because the people counted John as from God indeed. Think about that for a minute. I don't think Jesus was asking this question to trick them. I don't think that's what it was at all. In fact, if you go back to the beginning in Mark, the very first part of Mark, we're told the very message of John the Baptist. Mark chapter 1 and verse 2, it says, "And written the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. The voice of the one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight." John the Baptist's whole mission was to prepare the way for Jesus. And here's his message. In verse 4, it says, "John came baptizing in the wilderness and preaching a baptism of repentance for the remission of sins. Then all the land of Judea and those from Jerusalem went out to him and were all baptized by him in the Jordan, confessing their sins. Now John was clothed with camel's hair, with a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. And he preached, saying, 'There comes one after me who is mightier than I, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to stoop down and loose. I indeed baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit.'" The whole message of John the Baptist was that there's going to be one that's going to be greater than I. One that I'm not able to bend down and loose the sandals. That he must increase and I must decrease. That was the whole message of John the Baptist in his teaching and preaching. It was a baptism of repentance. It was supposed to be a change to prepare people's hearts for the reception of Jesus in their life. And so was it from God or was it from man? Well, there's another passage over in Luke chapter 7. In Luke 7, I'll try to find it here. In verse 29, it says, "And when all the people heard him, even the tax collectors justified God, having been baptized with the baptism of John. But the Pharisees and the lawyers, they rejected the will of God for themselves, not having been baptized by him." And so what does it say there about the baptism of John? It says that it was indeed the will of God, and that the Jewish leaders, they rejected the will of God for themselves, while the common folks, the sinners like the tax collectors and others, they were all baptized by the baptism of John because it was God's will for them in their life. And so the real answer is the baptism of John did come from God. And so if they said, "We believe in John," what did they fear? Well, they feared that Jesus would say, "Well, why didn't you believe him?" I think Jesus was trying to lead them to their own answer. They ask about his authority and who gave him the authority to do the thing. And if they were to be honest, if they were to answer it in the right way, then they would answer their own question, that his authority came from God. Man, as you go through John, his consistent message is that, I'm not doing these things of myself, but the message that I have is from God, and I don't speak these things on my own authority, but I and my Father are one, that the message that I'm preaching to you is from him, that if you don't receive that message, then you've rejected him. You've rejected the one that has sent me. And so Jesus was trying to lead them to their own answer. But if they said that John was from men, then they feared the people. During this period of time, there were people from all over the world, people from the dispersia of Israel, people from Galilee, which would have been where Jesus was primary. His popularity had just skyrocketed from Galilee. They were afraid that there was going to be some kind of uprising because the people believed in John and the people believed in Jesus. And so how did they answer? Well, they said, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. Because they weren't really sincere. See, if they had said, hey, look, you did some amazing things yesterday. We are just blown away by it. All the miracles and all your teachings and you cleansing the temple, we're really starting to get it. Then by whose authority are you doing these things? I think that's a legitimate question. That's something that they had every right to ask. That's something that we ought to ask today when we're doing things for the Lord. By what authority are we to do these things? By what authority was he doing these things? I think it's a legitimate question. But the problem was they were completely insincere, and they didn't really care whether they came to the truth of the matter or not. They're just trying to challenge him, trying to trip him, trying to find something to trap him in. And then if they could get him to say something, if they could get him to say something that the people would find not right, then they could put him to death. But Jesus says, no, you didn't answer my question. Because of that, I'm not answering your question. Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Are we sincere in asking Jesus, by what authority did he do these things? Hopefully we're not like the politician. Hopefully we're not like these Jewish leaders who simply didn't care. Now, this is in the context of a lot of questions that he would be asked. Later on, he'll be asked about taxes. He'll be asked about the resurrection. He'll be asked about all kinds of different things, like the greatest commandment of them all. They're trying to trap him. The problem was insincerity. And hopefully we're not in that boat like them. I appreciate everybody joining. Appreciate you watching. If you have any questions as you go through this, as you're studying, please make sure to comment down below, even if it's just the recording. Later on, the recording will show up and you have a chance to be able to watch the rest of the study if you didn't get a chance to see it all. Appreciate everybody joining. And until next week, everybody have a good weekend, a good week, and God bless.